we have received this alleged ransom letter involving Nancy Guthrie, and the other media outlets that obtained the same letter are in Tucson. It just has markers that the person who did this is in the area where Nancy is and either knows Nancy or has heard, Nancy's kind of a celebrity in the sense that her daughter is a big TV star. Welcome to the Two Angry Men podcast. Mark, as you know, we have received this alleged ransom letter involving Nancy Guthrie, and it is increasingly feeling to me like this is the real deal.
What are the earmarks of this thing that let you go to the point where you put out there that you thought it was real? Because that, to me, is really, that almost validates the fact that there's something to it.
Yeah, well, there are a number of things. One is the two items mentioned in this letter that presumably nobody would know unless they were part of that scene. One is the Apple Watch. Now, it's not a big thing that anybody knew that Nancy had an Apple Watch, a white Apple Watch, because she's been photographed with that with Savannah. But what's interesting in the letter is where it's placed in the house. And they mentioned that specifically. I found that interesting. The second thing is a destroyed floodlight. I know the FBI, I think they said damaged. The way it's written in the letter is destroyed. And that felt almost aggressive on the part of the writer. And, as if maybe that person did it so there wouldn't be any illumination. So that was.
Can I ask one other question also? When you got this and you look at it, I can almost tell, at least I do my own triage when this comes in. Did it have any of the triage markings that you normally would see, which would indicate, I always say my 5150 hurdle, the single space, the run-ons, the things like this? What was the character of it without giving it away?
Oh, I'll talk about that. Let me just finish up on these two items. So I didn't know, whether the placement was correct. And at the time, nobody knew about the floodlight. So I called the sheriff's department immediately, gave them the letter. And then a couple hours later, the FBI called. And I thought, well, the FBI is calling for a reason, because I figured if those items were not legit, the ones that were mentioned, the FBI wouldn't even bother with it. But they did. They called and they asked a ton of questions and wanted to find out about the origin of this email, which we can't tell them. And I don't think they've figured it out either. But as for whether this is a crazy person who wrote it, yes, we get tons of crazy people writing these. This is exactly the opposite. This is a well-constructed, structured, layered letter that has a beginning, middle, and end. It is grammatically all correct. Spelling is correct. It's not AI. You can tell whoever wrote this didn't throw it together in 5 minutes. And it is, I think, written by an intelligent and probably well-educated person. That's the way it reads to me. So it's the exact opposite of that, which put my antenna up even higher.
Right.
Now, the other thing that, look, I want to get into.
Does the letter itself make a ransom demand? And if so, what kind of currency?
Well, they're asking for it in Bitcoin, and
Correct.
They gave a Bitcoin address, and it's a legit address. The problem with Bitcoin is you just cannot find out who it's going to. And so,
well, they've got, that's where I push back a little bit, because I know from actually 2 cases I have right now that they don't want you to know this, but the government now has ways. They've got a front row seat, for lack of a better term. They've told me it's like watching a marathon. They can watch it go as it goes down the chain, so to speak, and they can generally follow it to a wallet.
Well, see, the first part of that I believe to be true, and that's what I've heard as well, that they can follow the chain. What I'm told is they still can't determine who it's going to. But maybe you're right. I don't.
Yeah, they say that. based on what I've seen in government discovery, I'm not buying that at all. I think they now know, and I think they've got access to digital wallets and things of that nature. I think they can trace all that. It reminds me of when they went and got Maduro. Nobody had ever heard of that kind of eardrum disabling kind of weapons that we have. I can tell you from discovery in other cases that they have a sophisticated ability to track this stuff. And by the way, I think it's one of the reasons that blockchain technology and all of that is actually being embraced.
If you're right, then it makes even a better case for the Guthrie family to pay the money even without proof of life, if indeed the feds could track it down, arrest the person, and recover the money. If you're right.
Well, that's why look. I've had this situation not often, but a couple of times. And normally it is in a ransomware kind of a situation or cyber warfare, things of that nature. But in this case, I would be surprised if they weren't engaged in some way, shape, or form. I think that's also why the FBI was so curious and questioning you and trying to figure it all out.
Well, I put my IT team on the phone with the FBI, and they spent a fair amount of time talking, and my IT team said that they reached a dead end in trying to figure out where this came from. And it's very...
Well, that I would believe, because the sophistication of routing the emails through kind of a washing machine, so to speak, I think is a lot more sophisticated than what the Bitcoin tracing is.
And you may be right in the Bitcoin, I don't know, but in terms of the tracing the email, we couldn't do it. And my sense from the conversation, and I will say, this is just above my skill set to understand what they were all talking about because it was very technical, but it sounded like everybody was stymied in terms of figuring that out.
Did they get a location where they hit a dead end?
We thought there was a location, and then it was so sophisticated that kind of blew up. So they don't have a location. They do not have a location. At least at the time we spoke with them, they didn't. And I don't know that they're going to be able to. My IT team thinks they can't. This episode is sponsored by Incogni. Personal information is more accessible than ever. Sometimes it's too accessible. So data brokers collect and sell your private details, your name, address, phone number, even browsing habits without you ever knowing. Your privacy should be yours to control. And that's why Incogni works behind the scenes to remove your data from these databases, reducing exposure to anyone misusing your information. So let me tell you about Incogni. It will hunt down these unethical sites and gets you your personal information removed from the places that expose your private details. You don't have to email anyone or fill out forms because Incogni handles the entire data removal process for you. It does not stop there. Incogni continues to monitor these databases, and they request new removals if your information appears again, which keeps your data yours. Now, that means fewer spam calls, fewer emails that are spam, and a lot of other benefits. Plus, if you care about the law, like we do, you probably value public records and transparency. The issue, it's pretty simple. Legal information that used to be accessible in context is now scraped by data brokers, repackaged and sold. And that can affect hiring, insurance, or even search results. Incogni uses privacy laws like GDPR and CCPA to contact data brokers to request removal of your information from commercial databases, giving you full control over how your name appears online. Because legal systems should protect your rights, not turn your past into profit. So you can get 60% off annual plans at incogni.com/angry with code ANGRY at checkout. It's risk-free, and Cogni offers a 30-day money-back guarantee if you're not completely satisfied. Live free from dangerous spam with Incogni. That's incogni.com/angry for 60% off annual plans. But I will say, in terms of location, there is something really interesting about this. And it leads me, and we'll talk about it in a minute, to believe that whoever wrote this note, if this is real, it is somebody from the Tucson area. But let me explain. There is a reference in the letter. Obviously, there's a money demand. And if the money demand is met by the Guthries, then it triggers something. And it triggers the return of Nancy within a certain period of time. So, and we're talking hours. And in terms of that time, it's interesting because we took the maximum time they gave. So pick a number and say that she'll be returned within X hours. We know what that X is because it's in the letter. I'm not going to say.
And then what did you do, a radius?
What we did was this. We figured that whoever's got Nancy, they're not going to fly back to Tucson because you're not going to get on an airplane and show ID and everything else, obviously. So they're going to drive. And they're not going to drive at 100 miles an hour because they don't want to get stopped for speeding, because if they get stopped for speeding, it's over. So they'd probably go about 60 miles an hour. So we looked at the 60 miles an hour and took the longest distance, and it's about a 700-mile radius. And it basically includes much of the western United States. And, you know, that's still a huge area, but at least it's something. In other words, it's not the whole United States. It's not Mexico or outside of the... Well, it could be, actually.
How'd you triangulate to Tucson?
Because
that's interesting to me, because, you know, there's another crypto-related incident at Tucson simultaneous to this, that at least that's kind of the scuttlebutt that's going around.
I'm glad you asked that. The way we traced it back to Tucson is because that's what the person who wrote the ransom demand said, that we will return her to Tucson within X number of hours. So we used Tucson as the center and then went out the number of hours maximum it would take to drive. And that's how we created the circle. And so at least there is something here that within that circle, they can be especially vigilant if this is real. So it's something, because up to this point, there's really nothing, but at least the circle gives you some way of focusing on this. And the reason I say that this is somebody in the Tucson area who wrote this thing is, I mean, think about it. Does it make sense? Somebody's watching the Today Show and says, wow, there's Savannah Guthrie. She's rich and famous. I'm going to go find a relative. And they find her in Tucson. Or does it make more sense that somebody in Tucson says, oh, Nancy Guthrie, her daughter's famous. I know Nancy Guthrie, or I heard of Nancy Guthrie. Her daughter's famous. It's Savannah Guthrie, and she's rich and famous. It feels like it's the latter rather than the former.
And by the way, also, does this person reference anything besides a watch, like a pacemaker or any other kind of don't try to find this or don't try to trace this or anything else that's indicative or consistent with information that was not publicly reported at the time?
They don't mention pacemaker. They do say this will be the only communication and the police aren't going to be able to help you. And they have two deadlines, one of which is already passed. The second one more consequential, which is Monday at 5. And
are they for money? Are they for, do you have to do something when you say a deadline of giving money?
Yeah, the money changed yesterday at 5.
Right.
The Monday deadline is different and more consequential.
Right. And so that's why I suspect that something was paid and they're tracing it.
I don't
That
think so.
makes some sense.
I
Why do you not think so?
because they are making pleas to return her, and the sheriff is asking people for help, and they're asking for proof of life. I got to say that if I were in their shoes, I would totally understand waiting because proof of life is going to be really important. This letter says she's okay but scared, and that she knows what's in this ransom letter. This is what the letter itself says, that Nancy knows. And so, they're obviously trying to put pressure on the emotional pressure on the family with that. But,
Yeah, but didn't the FBI contact you prior to the first deadline?
yes, we were
Okay,
we got the
right.
letter on Tuesday and we talked to the FBI on Tuesday.
Yeah, I suspect, complete speculation, that they can walk and chew gum at the same time. They can be making public pleas. They can be go down that route, which they should be doing. But at the same time, they can be testing out various things to try to. The writer of this. And you'd want proof of life, but the FBI, the investigative technique, might be to test out the first deadline and to see if that is proof of somebody that is other than just a looky-loo copycat or somebody who's trying to profit on this.
See, if I were running this, I mean, I would tell them, don't pay right now. Let the deadline pass and demand proof of life because whoever wrote this, if it's real, they want the money. I mean, that's their end game. They want the money. And if the more they have time to think, I got to show proof of life in order to get the money, the more likely they're going to get it before the Monday deadline. So the first deadline, it makes a difference financially, but it's not going to make a difference in terms of Nancy Guthrie's life. And so if you really want that proof of life, which I totally understand, you wait and you see if they feel the pressure to ultimately show something, an audio tape, a video, a something. And believe me, we're looking at our inbox, our tip line, every
Yeah,
minute,
I was
every
going to
minute.
say, how are you? What are you getting? What kind of quantity of incoming?
I mean, we always get incoming, but we haven't gotten anything else, obviously, from whoever wrote that letter. And the other two media outlets that obtained the same letter are both local TV affiliates in Tucson, and that again tells me that whoever wrote this is Tucson-based, because why would they send it to a local, and how would they even know the call letters and all?
What affiliation of Tucson are the other two?
What
NBC, ABC, CBS? What are they?
one is called KOLD, and I don't know. I don't know whether it's ABC.
I would interesting if it was an NBC affiliate.
I honestly, I should have looked at that and I didn't. But they're local affiliates nonetheless. And the point
Right.
being, they're not sending it to the other nationals. They send it to us, but they send it to two locals. It's making, I'll tell you, it just has markers that the person who did this is in the area where Nancy is and either knows Nancy or has heard, Nancy's kind of a celebrity in the sense that her daughter is a big TV star. And so that's kind of where my head is. But boy, they are in a rough position. We're talking Friday afternoon. They got till Monday on this thing. And again, they don't know for sure whether this note is real, but the way authorities are now talking about it, they seem to think it is, or at least it's their best hope.
So is it generic to the three media outlets, including TMZ? Or
Yes.
specific, each one gets it specifically. One document that is addressed to all three and it's the same, or is it tailored to each one?
Tailored to each one.
Okay. So that's interesting also.
Why? Why is that interesting to you?
Because they have picked recipients who are going to target certain audiences, and they know a demographic that they're trying to speak to or that they're going to get it out. It's interesting to me that they went one international TMZ and then they went two local. I get what you're saying about that it's that it's indicative of Tucson. I think that it's also consistent with the idea that she's still in that area.
I'll tell you something I haven't really talked about, and I'm going to only pose this as a hypothetical. What if it went to the local stations before it went to TMZ, and they were waiting to see if it got out,
Right.
and it
And I think
didn't?
that's exactly, I think that's, yeah, you read my mind. I was going to say whether it was tailored or not, because is there anything in the one that goes to TMZ which leads you to believe sequentially you were the last out of the three?
I can't say, but I'm just raising it as a hypothetical.
Yeah, that would be my guess. They thought that saying it local would get some traction. They got no traction. They went to TMZ.
That's a good theory.
Yeah, that's makes it makes a whole lot of sense to me. I don't think that that necessarily means that it's, you know, authentic in the sense that it's coming from the person, but for somebody who was trying to gain attention or trying to make this a profitable criminal endeavor, that makes some sense. That rings consistent. They thought if they just got it, and that's why I asked about the local affiliate. I wanted to see if they sent it to an NBC affiliate first, thinking that the NBC affiliate, because Savannah is with NBC, that would have triggered a national traction on it.
KOLD is a CBS affiliate. There is a second one. I don't know what the affiliate is on that second one. I got to tell you something. One of the first things that popped into my head, Nancy is not in great health. She has a pacemaker. She also has high blood pressure, and she has medications that she really needs. And so my feeling was that, the place to go if you're law enforcement is a pharmacy, because you want to see if somebody got a prescription that would match what she was taking recently. If somebody got a prescription during that time frame, that few days, because they need to keep her alive. If they feel like there ever was a chance they would have to show proof of life and she didn't have her meds, I would think that there would be pressure on whoever took her to get those meds, and they're not going to go back to her house. So the only thing they can do is see if they could land a prescription. And if they land a prescription, there's going to be some record of somebody getting that prescription who may not have gotten it before on those critical couple of days.
Well, have you run down the pacemaker angle? Because what at least is being reported is the pacemaker stopped at around 2 a.m.
It
on
was
the day
disconnected from the Apple Watch. Right.
Yeah. So it was disconnected. Just because it was disconnected does not mean that there aren't ways to make contact with it. And I just wonder if that's one of the things that they're exploring right now. And because disconnecting from the Apple Watch is one thing, but disconnecting from being able to be picked up is a completely and wholly different situation.
Yeah. I want to get back to the sophistication of whoever did this, that if this note is real, if it is a real ransom note and this person has Nancy Guthrie, it is, again, really well crafted and layered. And then you look at the crime scene, and, this person knew to disconnect the cameras. This person knew where to go. I mean, this person, I would assume when they say the floodlight was destroyed, if I walked in the backyard and I already saw a damaged floodlight, I would just simply say it's a damaged floodlight in the letter.
Or you could say broken.
Or broken. When you say destroyed, that feels to me like this person destroyed it because it was on and they didn't want to be illuminated. And so by using the word destroyed as opposed to damage, that makes me feel like they destroyed it because it was on and they didn't want to be captured, and they had gone to great lengths to disconnect the camera. And we know that somebody showed up, but not on video, at sometime around 1 a.m. So this person knew his or her stuff. That seems pretty
obviously
clear.
Somebody's familiar with the location, whether it's the note or was separate and apart. If the note is not authentic, somebody still knew certain things. I mean, by the way, you would have to know about the pacemaker and the Apple Watch together, unless it was just happenstance and somebody decided, I'm going to get rid of the Apple Watch because that has some kind of a find my device or share my device feature. And so they did not want that. But the pacemaker to me is a significant fact that I'm sure they are following up on.
Yeah, the other significant fact I think they must have already followed up on, and probably it didn't yield much, is that because this person was so careful, to me, they cased that joint before they did it. And if they cased the joint, they wouldn't have done it a month before. They would have done it sometime in a narrower time frame. That
Right.
you know that you go to all the neighbors, like a wide swath, and you ask, did you see a car in the area that didn't belong? Did you see? That would be that. I mean, that
Well,
could.
the other thing that,
And they may have surveillance.
Right. So you take the surveillance cameras, but also you go to the cell towers that are in the immediate vicinity and you check, 3 hours, 4 hours before, 5 hours after that time period. You see what's pinging, where it's pinging, and you can do some geofencing and reverse engineering of what numbers, if there was a phone that was active at the time. If these people are sophisticated enough to have not taken a phone into the location, that's also interesting, and actually would probably support your idea that this was highly intelligent and well crafted, and give it some you tilt towards it being more authentic.
Okay, so I have a question for you, and it's more of a psychological question. And since you've dealt with cases like this, this is the one thing I'm just fascinated by. So Savannah Guthrie and her brother and sister have all kind of delivered these emotional pleas to release their mother. And they have really tried to pull at the heartstrings, on the surface, you would think, of the person who took her. And to talk about what a wonderful mother she is, what a wonderful person she is, how, her grandkids love her. The cynical me says that's not going to work on somebody who kidnapped this woman, because they know what they've done. So what is the purpose of that? I'm not saying it's not authentic, because it is.
It's clearly authentic. It's clearly
Right.
comes from a place which is, I don't want to say cathartic, because cathartic,
but it's real.
idea,
it's just real.
but it's real. It's real. But what law enforcement, why they do this is they don't know who it is yet. So they have to keep all their options open. One of those options is that it's somebody who knows or has had prior contact, and that it is not somebody who is cold-hearted, calculated, and targeted because it has no interaction or prior contact. If it is somebody who has prior contact, who's got some mental health issues, or has got some kind of connection and is motivated by something else, they're hoping that this kind of penetrates that kind of fog.
Yeah, I hear you. It's hard to believe. I mean, when you do something like this, the impact it's going to have on the family. An 84-year-old woman, somebody who's clearly close to Savannah and the other kids. So it. Maybe you're right, but I just don't see how. I'm just trying to look for another reason.
Well, let me tell
why
you
they
this,
went
and it
public
goes
that
back
way.
to what we said before. The complete speculation, I'll preface it, then I've got to go. But they may not have, and I've seen a lot of people comment on this, the kind of traction and the exponential coverage this has received. I don't think anybody would have predicted that, even if you're, the mastermind, media mastermind. This has taken on a life of its own that has eclipsed other stories that are out there that seemingly, if you looked at, are bigger and more consequential. And I don't mean that in a cold-hearted way. I just mean if you're trying to do an analysis of it.
So can I give you a theory?
Yeah.
So my theory is that when they went public the way they did, law enforcement probably knows this is not going to make the kidnapper say, oh my God, I'll return her. But if anybody in that kidnapper's world knows what this person did, it would play on them. In other words,
Correct. Yes, that
they
is
would squeal.
I have no doubt your theory is right. I mean, and it also is part of the wide net. Clearly, you never know who's going to turn on who. So somebody might have it might tug at their heartstrings.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay, we have two. We have two. Hold on. Yeah, I got 2 minutes with you. You promised me that. So in 2 minutes, let's talk about how do you play this out through Monday. What does law enforcement do? What does the Guthrie family do?
Oh, they pay. I think there's no question, but that you pay. They've got the, I think, sophisticated ability to trace where it goes. You don't want to play around, whether it is this or any other note. I'm sure they're doing they've got profilers in here. They've got people who've analyzed your note. They've got people who've analyzed the other tips. They are casting a wide net.
So you pay the money and hope, even though you have no proof of life.
I think you do. Yes, I think you do. I mean, it's an impossible situation.
If the kidnapper really does have Nancy Guthrie and believes that they are completely anonymous, what skin is off their teeth to get an audio of Nancy Guthrie saying something where it's not AI. It's like, Savannah, I remember, here's what I gave you for your last birthday, or something that the public wouldn't know, that AI wouldn't know. So you just have her do an audio of something like that, because then you're going to get the money. I mean, if that's their end game, and they really do have Nancy, wouldn't that person give them some proof of life? Because that's where you cash in.
Yeah, but we may not know that. We may not know that, number one. Number two, they may not. And if they do, the people who took her may have this in the back of their mind, that is how we have traditionally, we meaning law enforcement, traditionally have traced people by sound, by where it is, by other kinds of metadata.
So doesn't it give you a little bit of pause about the legitimacy of the letter if the person wouldn't do something that simple and untraceable to secure the money, which is their point in the first place? I mean,
I agree, and I'm not embracing it. I'm just running through it. And at this point, you do everything you can. Law enforcement's got to be full bore on this.
Okay, you got to run to court. You got to do what I do.
I got to run to court.
But you got to do what I do, where I don't have to run to court.
Yeah, I know. Thank you. I got to wear my suit and tie. Someday I'll grow up to be Harvey Levin. Bye.
I'll see you.